As the Chicago Bears formally introduced Joe Thuney, Jonah Jackson, and Grady Jarrett on Wednesday, it became abundantly clear that their impact in Chicago is going to be just as important off the field as it is on the field.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On the show today, we're going to get to know these new Bears acquisitions a little bit better. We'll hear from Joe Thuney to get a better sense of what the leadership is that he's bringing to this offensive line and what he's learned from very successful winning cultures in New England and Kansas City that he's going to try and apply here with the Chicago Bears. Then we'll get to know Grady Jarrett a little bit more, his personality, and what he brings to this defensive line room as far as an example setter, a productive veteran player, and someone who it's going to be really easy for the Bears fan base to rally around and root for. And then we'll check in on the trade for Jonah Jackson as well and hear from Ryan Poles and Ben Johnson about how they found comfort in what he's been before in Detroit, what went wrong this past season in LA. And we'll hear from Jonah as well about how he saw that situation and what went poorly for him there. But what really stood out to me the most from the press conferences where all three of these guys were introduced was Joe Thuney and how he leads, how he really stands out as that guy who's going to be at the front of the offensive line room and set the example, not only just in terms of the quality of play, as making 3 straight Pro Bowls in a row, but also all of the little things, how he practices, how he carries himself, how he takes care of his body. This is someone who very naturally leads and commands a room. We even saw it at the press conference on Wednesday. They had both Joe Thuney and Jonah Jackson at the same time, being the two offensive line trades, playing the same position. And there was a time when a question was asked and it was sort of directed to both of you. What do you guys think about this? And Jonah verbally defers, well, Joe, I'll let you go first. Very verbally and clearly defers to Thuney's leadership. It's already just two guys who just met and haven't been teammates before being at a press conference together. Thuney is the leader and he's going to be the leader of this offensive line. And he's seen how great locker rooms operate, how great coaches how great coaches operate, how great offensive lines operate. And while, one player can't just take Patriots culture and Chiefs culture and bring it to the Chicago Bears locker room, it can go a long way when that's going to be one of the leaders of not only the offensive line, but I think the offense as a whole. And I thought he did a good job of describing what makes those teams and those locker rooms special that the Bears are hoping to build here with the help of leaders like Thuney coming in and setting that example.
And you played in 2 places with winning cultures. Did they share anything in common that you were going to try and help bring out here?
Just kind of, being in those places just felt like, everyone was pulling in the same direction. Everyone, all that mattered was winning. And I can really feel that here, starting from ownership to management to coaches and just meeting everybody and just there's such an intent and such, purpose to win. And it makes me excited just even being here a couple of days and just excited to be part of it. And, want to contribute as much as I can, as fast as I can. And, just ready to get going.
Dan Wiederer from the Chicago Tribune. Joe, just piggybacking on that question and answer, what do you see as the value of your experience in those 2 programs that will allow you to become a compass for younger players as you get your feet on the ground here?
Yeah, fortunate to play for some really good coaches, really good quarterbacks, and really good offensive lines. And, I think just being a part of that and seeing how, the day-to-day goes, how certain people approach, meetings, how they approach practice, what they do in between meetings and practice, nutrition, I felt it was so fortunate to witness that and to be around it and, tried to copy, what guys were doing in the building and, just kind of, they took it a day at a time, and tried to make small improvements each day and get better. And, That's kind of what I've been trying to do too.
First of all, I was a little surprised how much like Joe Thuney and I actually look a little bit alike. Like if I gained 100 pounds, I could probably pass as Joe Thuney out in Chicago. I just got to grow my beard out a little bit longer as he's got it now, but we have a similar look, which was fun for me to see at the press conference this way. But more seriously, in terms of what he said there, like I think it's one thing to take a player who's been winning on other teams and to plug him into Chicago and say, oh, hey, you won over there, so come win over here. Like it's not as simple as just like, he was on winning teams, so therefore he's going to make things better. Like it's specifically that ability to lead and apply those habits and just day-to-day operations to Chicago. Because last year's starting center Coleman Shelton, like he has a Super Bowl ring with the Los Angeles Rams. He won a championship. He was on winning, successful Rams teams, but he was not that front of the room leader of this Bears offensive line. And no one else really on this offensive line had that kind of leadership ability or that kind of experience in the league. Like Nate Davis was kind of your elder statesman on the offensive line, and he was seemingly the opposite of what the example you would like to be set for your team. But you look at like what Thuney has been able to go through in his career so far, right? Drafted in 2016, a third-round pick by the Patriots. Rookie season, starting left guard, wins the Super Bowl. Second year, they get to the Super Bowl and lose. Third year, they're back to the Super Bowl again and win again. So his first 3 seasons, he's starting at left guard. I think he started in all 3 Super Bowls. I know he definitely started in 2 winning Super Bowls in 16 and 18. I didn't double check the losing Super Bowl in that game. But like right away in your career, all he knew was Super Bowls. Gets franchise tagged in 2020, comes back to the Patriots one more year, but they kind of have a down year. Leaves in free agency the next offseason, joins the Chiefs, and by 2022, starting in the Super Bowl again and winning. Now he was on the team for their 2023 Super Bowl victory, but he got injured during the playoffs, so he didn't get to play in that Super Bowl. Then of course made the Super Bowl this season, played left tackle, but lost in that Super Bowl. So Joe Thuney's been in 6 Super Bowls in his career and has won 4 of them. 3 as a starter and 1 injured on that team. Like that's a crazy amount of experience. And then to have like one of the leaders who can come in and not just say like, oh yeah, that's how we did it over there, but like, this is how we're going to do it here. And guys are going to listen to me because I've been successful, because I'm a Pro Bowl caliber player. Like I'm not only the best offensive lineman on this team, but I'm also the offensive lineman who's had the most success early in his career. That's going to go a super long way for whoever the Bears draft on the offensive line this year, but also the development of younger guys like Darnell Wright and Braxton Jones. I know like Drew Dahlman is not a younger player comparatively, but like, he's 26. He's not old. He's not young either, but he hasn't won a lot in Atlanta. Like he's going to have some things he can garner from Thuney in that regard. I just think that's going to elevate this offensive line in ways that it's going to be hard for us to measure and hard for us to like directly tie to Thuney, but like we know it's going to be there. It's hard to see, but it's more behind the scenes stuff that's going to be super valuable for this offensive line, and I think it's going to help this group reach a higher level. I think the similar thing is true for Grady Jarrett on the defensive line, where I'm still a little bit skeptical about just how good Grady Jarrett still is at this stage of his career. I still think he's a good player, but not as great. But he has no shortage of confidence, no shortage of personality, and I do think what he brings to the defensive line is a similar amount of like leadership and culture setting for that group that I think was also lacking in some of that leadership in years past. So we'll hear from Grady Jarrett and why I think he's going to be a very quick, fast fan favorite next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Do you ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out or online shopping and entertainment, it's easy to lose track sometimes, but that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. I use the Monarch Money app, and I've really enjoyed it because it's not just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts and investments and spending in one place, so you can stop managing your money and start building wealth, especially with where the stock market has been lately. I've really enjoyed having quick and easy access to see how my finances are going at any time. And it really is all in one convenience. Instead of juggling multiple apps where your checking account is here and your credit card is there and your investment account is here, Monarch combines it all and helps you even plan long-term goals. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's Monarch, MONARCH, money.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first 12 months. Just like Thuney is going to come in and set the tone for how this Bears offensive line should perform, I think there's an aspect of Grady Jarrett coming in and being that vocal leader for this defensive line. I think the defensive line had a little bit less of a void in that regard, but at the same time, I think there was still room to add more of that in here, because I don't know that, as much as Montez Sweat is the most talented and soon to be most productive defensive lineman the Bears have, he doesn't strike me as the vocal leader. He's not the guy who necessarily, yes, he leads by example and is a leader, but he's not loud, right? He's more of a speak soft and carry a big stick kind of defensive lineman for this Bears team. Really, last season, the vocal leader has been Andrew Billings. He's kind of the big voice in the room that had a great season and played really well and is the veteran elder statesman in terms of just experience in the NFL. But then when Andrew Billings goes down with the torn pec in week 8 or week 9 or whatever week of the season, he's maybe still there on the sidelines and still there during the week in the locker room, but on the field from snap to snap, you don't have that leader in the middle. And then when you've got, Dexter and Pickens and DeMarcus Walker, I guess, was a bit of a leader there too, but you kind of had a lot of little bits of leadership. But I think somebody like Grady Jarrett instantly comes in and sets a little bit of a different tone, especially for the defensive tackle position, just on elevating the standard for everyone else. Billings had a great season last year, but over the majority of his career, right, he's been more of a journeyman, nose tackle, not a guy who was thought of as a game-changing difference maker, a solid veteran player, but someone who, bounced around, played for, 3 different teams in 3 different seasons, 4 different teams in 4 different seasons, I think. And, this is not to be disparaging of Andrew Billings, but it's that Grady Jarrett is another level of, a guy who's been to the Pro Bowl and still plays at a very high level. And someone who I think just because of his next level ability, he brings a certain amount of confidence that I think everyone else on the defensive line needs to match and will raise their levels of confidence because of how he carries himself. It's an example that's not only in what he does, but also what he says. And also, he talked a lot about at his press conference about taking care of his body. And that's how he's been such an Iron Man for his whole career, is what he does in the offseason to really make sure he's not taking weeks off and he's not putting bad stuff in his body. And he's always, physically taking care of everything he possibly can to maximize his durability. And he's been able to do that outside of one ACL injury that at some point injuries are not completely preventable, but feels great. Still feels like he said multiple times his best football is still in front of him because he's got that kind of confidence that things are always going to go well and that he's always going to be playing at a super high level. Now, of course, eventually there's going to be a little bit of a drop off, and we can talk about that a little bit here, but I want you to just hear the way Grady Jarrett talks and how easy he is to root for, and I think how good of an influence he's then going to be on this defensive line.
The edge guys always get the glory, but 36.5 career sacks is no slouch. How have you been able to be so disruptive from the interior for the last 10 years?
I think just being relentless in the pass rush. On 36 sacks, I am the franchise leader in quarterback hits as well. And sometimes guys, gotta throw that in there. Sometimes you get seasons. Sometimes where guys may have 8 hits, but they might have 6 sacks. You're like, dang, but you might have a guy who have 20, 25 hits and have 3 or 4 sacks. But affecting the quarterback is the bottom line. Getting them off the spot, getting them uncomfortable. So to be able to be in a position from an interior standpoint, it means a lot. Especially when you're gonna have dominant guys from the outside coming in every direction and whatever else Coach Allen draw up. So being able to be a piece to add to this already group that's here, it means a lot.
Grady, Matt Zahn, CBS Chicago over here. You said your best days, you feel like your best days are still ahead of you. Obviously, you've had some pretty good days in your career. So at age 31, what gives you the confidence that you still have your best days in front of you?
Because if I didn't have that confidence, I wouldn't be sitting here. You know, if I got comfortable after my first contract extension, I wouldn't be sitting here. If I got comfortable after my second contract extension, I wouldn't be sitting here. And at the end of the day, this new contract that I got with a new team is just motivating me, you know, and I'm gonna be like that till, you know, the day I can't do this no more. But until that, I'm gonna always strive to be better. I'm gonna always strive to learn, and you know, you never really figure it all out. The day you think you figure it all out is you can only go down, and so that's what I'm excited about, and that's what I'm confident in. My body is good, my body is strong, and my mind is, you know, hungry to learn. I'm just in a position to where I'm in a special place at the right time around the right people, and I'm super excited for what's to come.
Do you still feel like a young guy?
I mean, we about to start OTAs. We're gonna line it up. They're gonna see that strength, that speed, all that. So, I mean, you don't know me obviously yet, but you'll see. You get to learn, and I'm confident in my abilities to be highly productive and have my best seasons still ahead of me.
That to me is what feels like the real value of Grady Jarrett is there, right? Like that's the kind of tone setter you want at your defensive tackle position, and the kind of player you want to help mentor the likes of Gervon Dexter and Zach Pickens and, you know, Chris Williams and everyone else on your defensive line, because that's the sort of the set example you want. I'm still a little bit skeptical about how good Grady Jarrett's going to be this season, because I think he dropped off more last season than a lot of people are admitting or willing to cope up to there. I don't think he was like bad, but Grady Jarrett was once, you know, top 3, top 5 defensive tackle in football, and I don't think he is that anymore. Can he get back to that? He certainly thinks his best football is still ahead of him, as he says there. He's got to have that confidence, and if there's anybody you would bet on bouncing back and having a better season this year than did last year, it's Grady Jarrett. Like there's a lot of reason to suggest, you know, he could be very much better, but I think it was a career low in pass rush win rate this past season, a career high in missed tackles. Like little things are starting to drop off, but maybe playing with Montez Sweat and with Andrew Billings and with Dayo Odengbo and Gervon Dexter and whoever else the Bears still add at defensive line throughout the rest of free agency and the NFL draft, like maybe that, along with the idea of him being able to play fewer snaps in that rotation with better talent around him, can help re-elevate some of his game while also elevating everybody else's game from all the double teams he's going to attract. He definitely still has that reputation. But I think to me, like between the attention he's going to garner from opposing offensive lines and the culture and confidence and personality he can bring to that room, like that might make him worth the contract, even if the level of play doesn't quite on its own get up to that point. Like this is the kind of player who I think goes a long way towards helping the rest of your defensive line be better versions of themselves. And so I'm not willing to count out Grady Jarrett at any point in this process. Everyone's also praising it as this perfect move. And we need to remind ourselves that like the Atlanta Falcons released him as a salary cap casualty. They decided Grady Jarrett wasn't good enough to keep around at his previous price tag. Now the Bears got him for less than that previous price tag, but I think he was making like 17 and a half. And the Bears got him for 14 and a half. So, you know, the Falcons at some point decided he's good, but not that good. And so we should be weary that all of a sudden he's going to be great, because I think if he was still truly, truly great, the Falcons would still want him on their defensive line and would find ways to keep him around on their defensive line. You tend to keep around the guys that you think are still really, really valuable. And the Falcons decided, well, you know, maybe not as much as they thought. So that's why I'm kind of coming at this with a little bit more of a skeptical eye than I think a lot of other people are. And that's not to say don't be excited about Grady Jarrett. Grady Jarrett's easy to root for and someone I'm looking forward to seeing what he does in Chicago. I think he can still play better in Chicago, but you know, with all free agent moves, a healthy dose of skepticism and an extra grain of salt goes a long way towards not being fooled every single offseason that you're going to win the offseason championship every single year. I've expressed a similar skepticism about Jonah Jackson, but hearing Ben Johnson and Ryan Poles talk about their comfort with him, I think went a long way towards easing some of those concerns. So we'll hear from the Bears head coach and general manager, as well as Jackson himself, about what went wrong with the Rams and why he's confident things can be better with the Bears in 2025. Next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and who's cutting down the nets. If you got a couple underdogs you want to ride, it's easy on the FanDuel app. Or if you want to ride with the favorites as well, they make it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. If college basketball is not your thing, that's fine. You can bet on the NBA, MLB, NHL. You can even look ahead to the NFL draft and bet on who's going to be the first player taken at each position, who's going to be the #1 overall pick, and so much more. All in the FanDuel app that's simple to use, safe, and when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Thuney is going to be a big leader for this offensive line. Grady Jarrett's going to be a big leader for this defensive line. Jonah Jackson can come in and not have to worry about as much of that. Like he's much more of a, kind of like what the Bears have had in the past, where, good player, kind of soft-spoken, and, a classic offensive lineman, just a big dude who likes to play football, likes to hit, and likes to be mean, but doesn't necessarily command the room the same way. With Jackson, they're just trying to get him back to playing the Pro Bowl caliber football that he played in Detroit, which was not necessarily what we saw in Los Angeles. Of course, story with him and the Rams, they move him to center. He starts there in week 1, and then they have injuries and bounce him back to guard. And then he gets hurt and misses more than half the season, or about half the season in the middle of the year, and then comes back and plays a little bit of center, and then they end up benching him for the rookie center, and then at the end of the year, he comes back and plays guard again, and it felt like he never really had a home, and he never really got fully comfortable there. And so it's easy enough for us to look at the last year with the Rams and ignore that and write that off and say, kind of a bit of an aberration, not necessarily what he had been prior to that throughout his career, not necessarily reflective of who he is as a football player, because Ben Johnson raved about how he carries himself, how he plays mean and vicious and intelligent, and like all the things that, that give you confidence in the player behind the scenes to give you the best version of themselves on the field. Definitely no concerns about a Nate Davis situation as far as willingness to practice and play through stuff and be dedicated to the sport of football. That's not the real concern here. So what I want to do is I'll start by playing Ben Johnson and Ryan Poles, and then we'll cut right away to a clip of Jonah Jackson, all talking about what they saw from him last season and why they're confident in him getting back to the level of play he played in Detroit versus Los Angeles.
And then with Jonah, for both of you guys, what did your homework turn up in terms of what his 2024 was like in Los Angeles and sorting through that?
Yeah, just there was a position change. He started out playing center. That's out of, you can ask him about it, but that's out of position. So it just started up a little bit choppy. But when you go back and see when he was in Detroit, I go all the way back to Rutgers when I watched him. The guy is made of the right stuff, and he's capable of really helping us up front, anchoring, but also getting pushed in the run game.
Yeah, the guy's a Pro Bowl caliber guard, so that's what we're going to get out of him.
What's it been like for you to reunite with Ben here in Chicago, and then how would you describe the last year in LA and what happened there for you?
It's awesome. I had a great relationship with Ben. He was with me when I was a young pup my rookie year, and what he brings to the table is awesome, and I couldn't be more excited, especially having a guy like this on the line, Drew, Darnell, and Braxton. But last year it was a little hiccup along the road. Things like that happen, and I feel like it definitely sharpened me a little bit. Brought everything into perspective. Like this game, it can come and go whenever. But I was able to build more of appreciation for it, and hone in on my craft, and I'm excited for what's to come.
Now, Ben Johnson also confirmed that Joe Thuney will start at left guard, Jonah Jackson will start at right guard, and he didn't say this, but this implies that when the Drew Dahlman center signing is official, of course, then Dahlman will be your center. So we know exactly where these players are going to play, and there's not going to be this positional musical chairs, in theory, with Jackson having to move around and learn different spots. Now, you may remember, he made the Pro Bowl as a left guard in Detroit, not a right guard, but he pointed out he made his first career start in the NFL with Ben Johnson and the Detroit Lions at right guard against the Chicago Bears. So he's played a decent amount of right guard in his career. And I think the important thing for Jackson is not, is it left or right? It's that you pick one and sit him there. As with any offensive lineman, there's a lot of value in just being able to focus on one position, one set of footwork, one set of hand placement with, being more right-handed versus left-handed, depending on which side of the offensive line you're on. Like, that'll go a long way towards Jonah Jackson getting back to the Pro Bowl level of play that Ben Johnson kept referring to him as having. The one thing that was missing from the entire press conference of both Jonah Jackson and with Ben Johnson and Ryan Poles is like, no one really asked about or touched on the injury history. And that to me is the bigger concern with Jackson. I'm sure Jonah Jackson will get back to playing like his Detroit Lions level of football, which is a very fine starting caliber, above average guard in the NFL. That's not that big of a question mark to me. It's like, are you getting the Rams, Jonah Jackson, or Lions, Jonah Jackson? You're getting the Lions, Jonah Jackson. The problem is even the Lions, Jonah Jackson, had injury issues. I know we talked about this a little bit after the trade happened, but like you look back at his career, yes, this past season was perhaps the most injured, where he was only on the field for about 25% of the plays for the Rams. But his last 2 seasons in Detroit, he was on the field for 67% of the plays and 69% of the plays. He's missing almost a third of the season, each of his last 2 seasons in Detroit. Like, there is a very real history of a variety of injuries, right? It's not just the same ankle over again or anything, but it's like nicks and bruises and bumps and miss a couple games here, miss a couple games there. The kind of stuff that we were concerned about with Tevin Jenkins. And that's where I never really heard much to alleviate those concerns. I'm sure when he's on the field for those 65 to 70% of the snaps, you're going to get good quality play. But what are you doing for the other than 30 to 35% of the snaps that he has more consistently been injured on? Like, there wasn't this reassurance of like, oh yeah, the injury thing isn't that big of a deal. So to me, it highlights the importance of making sure that you do have really good offensive line depth, that you've got a quality backup guard in case Jackson gets injured again, because that's really been his last 3 seasons in the NFL have all dealt with variety of injuries that have kept him out of fairly significant portions of the season. So whether that's drafting a guard in the second round that's ready to go, or signing a more prominent free agent than just Ryan Bates as your backup, I'd really like to see a more significant investment in the depth there, knowing that that's something that has come with Jonah Jackson, and it's something that Drew Dahlman has had ankle injuries the last couple of seasons as well. Like, you need to be prepared for, 6-7 good offensive linemen, not just a very good starting 5. So that's something I'm going to be keeping an eye on moving forward, but it's not really about the quality of play from Jonah Jackson. It's just about keeping him on the field. The same way it was the same conversation for Tevin Jenkins. The Bears decided Jenkins not worth it at this point, but because Jonah Jackson has that Ben Johnson familiarity, that makes that one an easier move. And at least with Jackson,
and then with Jonah, for both of you guys, what did your
at least with Jackson, it's with the trade for his contract, it's basically like one more year. You're guaranteed this year, and if for some reason there's a major injury situation again, you can get out of Jonah Jackson's contract after this season without too much trouble. So there's some long-term flexibility there. Unlike Nate Davis, where you were kind of locked in for a couple of years, even as he dealt with injuries, Jonah Jackson could be one and done if things go poorly, or you've got him for 2 years, plus you could extend him beyond that if things go well. So I like generally the direction the Bears are going here. I like the talent they brought in with these 3 players. I like the leadership and the culture aspects that Joe Thuney and Grady Jarrett bring in, and I think it's going to go a long way towards Ben Johnson establishing a better culture here than what they had under Matt Eberflus. Still requires winning for that stuff to really matter and to really sink in. That's ultimately how this is all going to be judged. And we'll see what other moves the Bears make to get them closer to that winning all offseason long. Right here on the Locked On Bears podcast, we'll break down more free agent signings if the Bears make them. They got to sign some more players here. Plus, we'll get you ready for the NFL draft as well. So make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. So if you're looking for a second listen, check out the national Locked On NFL podcast, covering all of the biggest stories in the NFL twice a day. Podcast in the morning with Tyler Rowland, and then a second episode comes out in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins, making sure we're on top of all the biggest stories in football. Just coming back tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Bears. Make us your first listen once again for another opportunity to bear down.